Welcome to the Change Within podcast. My name is Gerard Uselli. This is episode 37, and I can't believe that number for the amount of time that I've been doing this for 3 months because it's been 37 different guests, so much perspective as far as how people share their change and how they embrace it throughout their lives. My next guest is somebody who is really prevalent and making a name for himself within the cancer world, and going through his own experience, he is somebody who is able to emphasize with people and to understand where they come from in getting them to a higher level of attainment mentally, physically, and emotionally. Matt Ode. Matt, how are you today?
Awesome. Gerard, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be on the podcast, excited to share with your community. And yeah, man, just it's been a wild, couple of years, but now I'm grateful to be able to give back and really try to make an impact in the cancer community.
Absolutely. And to kind of like draw it back a little bit, because this is a one question I love to ask all of my guests. What was your childhood like growing up?
Yeah, a lot of sports. I loved sports. I did everything. You name it, I've done it. From football to cross country, literally. And it was a lot of. I would say I had like a competitive drive. My dad was very competitive. He was the coach of a lot of my younger sports growing up. And then, typical childhood, loved hanging out with my friends, played a lot of video games as well, all that kind of stuff. I'll be honest, though, I was not like a school oriented type of person. I was always the type of person, I don't know, I just felt like just that system did not work for me. And for me, it was more like I liked being out on my own. I liked doing things that was like out of the ordinary, and I excelled at random things, not necessarily like science and history and things like that. So that was kind of my childhood, and I think that's what led me to be an entrepreneur. For which we'll talk more about. And I think if you talk to a lot of different entrepreneurs, they would say the same thing: that school was not, the system just did not work for them, and they felt like they had more uniqueness in their life. So that was kind of my childhood, and I just felt like there was just something bigger for me.
I'm going to make a point real quick. So something interesting that you said is I feel like a lot of people, if they don't go the entrepreneurial route, they'll typically have school as a backbone. But the entrepreneurs in this case, a lot of them tend to use it as their arms and legs to reach themselves to other opportunities along the way.
Yep.
And then having that branch as far as the experience in a classroom, just for kind of like getting to one step at a time. But then, as an entrepreneur, that not to say more, but things differently and how you can individually make that impact.
Absolutely. I think probably the best lesson I learned from school was the connection part, learning how to become friends with the right people, learning to be, lose some people in your life, learning to communicate. I think communication is the biggest thing, especially once we get into college too, communication and learning to create, new friends, and, you're on your own, you have independence, there's more to it than just a structured school system. So yeah, so that's kind of how I was, always felt.
Absolutely. And kind of to that point, because I feel like with the school system as well, this kind of goes hand in hand with how health can be sometimes and how you can individually learn things as well. So my next question is, what did being healthy mean to you as a kid? And what were your experiences like being around people who weren't as healthy?
Yeah. So, for me, I didn't really start eating healthy till I was in college, because then that's where, so pretty much throughout my whole childhood up to college, I was very active. So I was predicated on always doing something. The majority of my high school career was actually cross country and track. So a lot of, basically running, and, I was in great cardio shape, but I had no strength in me. And, I ran 1 year in college. I liked it, but it got to be way, way too much. And eventually I started getting more into lifting. So I started to go like a personal trainer route. I've been a personal trainer for 8 years on top of what I'm doing now. Yeah. So health and fitness has been like my backbone. And, when I started getting into college and I stopped actually running cross country and I started focusing on just pure health. So still doing cardio, but adding some lifting into it. And then I started focusing on the nutrition as well. Once you can get all three of those, plus, there's more to it. There's sleep, there's mental health as well, such as meditation, praying, or whatever you feel is necessary. But those three key factors plus sleep. So I would say those four key factors, are the most important thing when it comes to creating a healthy lifestyle. Get enough sleep. I always try to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Make sure you're putting the right foods in your body. Well, how I look at it is look for micronutrient dense foods, such as like high vitamins, high mineral dense foods. So lots of leafy greens. I eat tons of vegetables. And if I'm going meat, I eat lean meat. And obviously you have cheat meals. I always do an 80-20 rule. And, besides that, man, like, making sure I'm staying active, all 7 days a week. A lot of people are like, oh, you need rest days. That's true. But you're also able to do something every day, whether it's stretching, whether
Thank
it's doing
you for
something.
saying that.
Yeah, you
Oh my
don't
God. A
need to take
lot
a
of people
complete
don't
day off.
understand that.
Yeah. But you don't need to be going out and do a marathon 7 days a week. That's all it is. It's just like find your balance, find what you enjoy, but even if it's just 30 minutes on a Sunday where you're taking time and doing something, it's going to make a world of difference, because you know what it does is it creates momentum, it creates a routine, and that's what allows you to not get off of track. When you're just staying consistent and you finally get yourself into a routine, everything kind of comes together. It's much easier to not let yourself off when you are sick. So, when you are sick, yes, I would recommend taking a couple of days off, but then you need to get yourself right back on track. That's the problem with most people when they're on a health journey, is they let 2 or 3 days turn into 2 or 3 weeks, turns into 2 or 3 months of not working out, of eating unhealthy. You have to stay consistent. That's all I could tell you. There's no magic pill to this. There's no magic trick. It's consistency plus figuring out what works best for you.
And nobody's body itself is the same. And I feel like that's another ultimatum that we all have to face. No matter how we actually do our routines and understanding those 4 components, everyone's body will be ultimately different.
Yep, you got it.
Also, kind of like to that point, and going through your own health experiences yourself, how did your mindset evolve when you first had testicular cancer?
Yeah. So, okay. So we'll get into my story here then. So, at the time I was a personal trainer. I still am, but I was very healthy at the time, 6, 7 days a week working out, making sure that I'm eating the right foods, everything. And then all of a sudden I started noticing these minor back pains. I was 24 years old at the time. I'm 29 now. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And throughout the summer, I just started dating my girlfriend, and, we were doing all these activities, and all of a sudden it started hurting more and more. My back just started getting more and more pain, but I was just stubborn because, at 24, I thought it was lifting, or I thought it was something like that. So I started taking days off. I started trying to recover. And it got to the point where one night I actually ended up puking up blood, got rushed to the emergency room, found out that I had lost 2/3 of the blood circulating in my body, which is actually equivalent to being shot with a gun. Got rushed in, gave me 6 bags of blood. And the next morning, when I thought it was just an ulcer, because that's what they assumed it was, that's where they found out that I had the highest stage of testicular cancer. They found an 11-centimeter tumor in my small intestine. And at the time, they rushed me to the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic, which is, thank goodness, one of the top hospitals in the entire country. So I was right at my doorstep. And for me, mentally, it pretty much was like, one day you're like, okay, I'm sick, but I didn't know like anything. It could have been a bad flu. I could have had X, Y, and Z, to now I have cancer. And at the time, in the very beginning, it was just me and my parents who knew, and I was in shock. I was like, okay, how do I be strong for them? How do I be strong for when I have to share this news to Lauren, my girlfriend? How do I be strong to my friends and stuff when I have to relay this news? And I try to be this strong individual. And I think a lot of men can relate to this, is like, you get some type of news and you want to just hold it in because you don't want to express your emotions at the time. And it's not that I'm going to get to the point here where that is not what you should be doing, but that's what I did do for a couple of days. And as friends, finally I get to the hospital, friends start flooding in, and then Lauren arrives, and she's only like dating me for 2 months. So I'm thinking she's either going to break up with me potentially, or I don't know how this is going to go. And that's when me and her finally like had this connection, and I just let all my emotions go. And for me, mentally was probably one of the best things that could have happened, because for a lot of men, the reason we have anxiety, the reason we have PTSD, the reason why we get depression is because we hold in our emotions. And every time something happens and you hold that in, extra pound of weight lifted on your shoulder, extra pound of weight lifted on your shoulder. But when you're finally able to release, it's not like all of it just goes away, but you can finally let your emotions go. And I'm telling you, it allowed me to realize that this journey is just not about myself. It's about everybody else that's involved. And I can use those people to help me throughout my cancer journey. I mean, I right then when I found out I had to go right into chemotherapy, I had no time to waste and it was very stressful, but I knew that I had people there that I could relate to and that could help me through that situation. So that's what I tell people who's going through the mental journey is do not, especially men, because women are really good at sharing their emotions most of the time, but maybe for some women too, but for you men especially, it's okay. You're not weak. It's okay. It's actually good to be vulnerable because the more vulnerable you are, the more people can relate, the more people can actually understand what you're going through. And that's what I did. And it helped me so much. Yes, I had a lot of ups and downs, but that's what I would say through the mental part of it.
I'm going to compare something like this to a comic book style, like newspaper, especially in this case, because imagine, like, let's say if you hold in your thoughts and then people are trying to cloud up the questions they assume they want to ask you, but then it never leaves the cloud.
That's so true. It's exactly it. How are there people supposed to ask you the right questions? How are people supposed to know what you're going through if you aren't willing to open up? At that point, you're just struggling with your inner self the whole time. And you're not weak for letting it go. I don't care how strong of an individual you are. You get diagnosed with cancer, that shit is, I don't care how strong you are, you need to have other people in your corner, whether it's somebody who's gone through cancer who you can relate to and actually talk to them and get to know the actual mental struggle they went through, which is one of the people I did. I found a survivor that went through similar cancer than me, or it's a spouse or a loved one or a friend that they know they're going to listen to you when you're struggling through something like that. And they may not be able to know exactly how you're feeling, but they're feeling emotions too. Trust me, they know that they're trying to figure out how to help you. So that's what I would say is you have to open up or you're going to be just like you said, people are not going to have any idea what's going on.
And I think just one final point too. So, like, when you were opening up to your girlfriend, just going through the actual journey of it itself, how are you, like, going to, like, other people who went through the same thing as you in the hospital? Did you feel like you initiated more of the conversations even in the early stages?
They actually have. So I was very fortunate. The Cleveland Clinic has what's called a Fourth Angels Mentor Program. And what happens is they bring on other survivors that have had similar cancers. You went through the same chemotherapy, had a similar surgery, things like that. I mean, obviously the complications that I'm going to share, none of them went through, and I didn't go through some of the ones they did, but to be able to talk to them, you kind of just connect and they just ask you, they're just like, hey, first they'll tell me like, hey, you're going to feel tough on these days. You're going to feel better on these days. And if you need to talk through certain things in this, I'm here for you. So that's how the people who were going through cancer or were survivors have helped me. Now, for my girlfriend, it was a totally different thing where I just needed to kind of be the man to open up at first, and then she could ask the questions that needed to get involved.
Absolutely. And kind of to this point too. So, as you've been free of cancer for a few years now, what have you been doing maybe a little bit differently to keep up with your health?
Yeah, so I apologize if there's maintenance on I can't control that.
Oh,
My
good.
bad if you hear something. It's maintenance here for a second, so I'll wait a second. But so can you repeat that question one more time for
Oh,
me?
yeah, no problem. So, as you've been free of cancer for a few years now, like, what have you been doing maybe a little bit differently to keep up with your health?
Oh yeah, definitely. So number one thing is, I had to. So long story short, and we'll get more into my story. 3 years ago, I was 110 pounds. I had to completely relearn to live my life again. I had 5 major surgeries in less than 30 days. I was in a coma for over 2 weeks. I was in the ICU for over 40 days. So I had to completely relearn to live my entire life again. So it was like ground zero, learning to get my strength back, learning to get my health back. And I would say the number one thing that allowed me to do it was that I maybe didn't do before was learning to be present. Learning to be
Hmm.
present, learning to focus on one thing every day instead of overwhelming myself. Because a lot of the times I would pretty much dwell on the past or I'd be anxious about the future. And I said, you know what? No. The only things I'm going to do is I'm going to learn from the past and I'm going to plan for my future. And I'm going to stay most of the time right in the present. And I said, because this was life or death for me. If I didn't start taking care of my body, I would pass away within a month or two. And my body was just so weak. So I had to focus on one thing a day that could get me to where I wanted to be. And this is a lot of people on a health journey right now. If you're on a health journey, stop overcomplicating yourself. Stop saying, I have to eat all these good foods. I have to work out all these. You don't need to start working out 7 days a week. I'm saying you can work out 7 days a week, but you do not have to start working out 7 days a week right off the bat. It's like somebody who smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day and just saying, let's cold turkey it. Like 0.001% of people actually can do that. You have to have a process. You have to focus on small little increments. And it's just like that saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's the same exact saying. Practice makes perfect. When you're doing one little thing every day, it makes a compound effect. And you want to know what builds confidence is keeping the promises you make to yourself. So when you say, I'm going to do that one little thing today,
Yeah.
you go out and you do it. Stop making the excuse. Stop saying X, Y, and Z. Just get it done. And then guess what happens? It creates momentum. And then guess what happens with momentum? I just said it earlier. Momentum creates rituals and routines. And what rituals and routines does is it creates confidence within yourself. And when you have confidence, you feel like it's not like a chore to go out and you have to do this today. I have to do this. It's I get to do this today. I'm, lucky enough to get to do this, or it's just part of my routine. And it's like not even a burden whatsoever that I have to, pack my meals and I have to, get this workout in. But it takes time. So that's what I did. That was the biggest thing that I learned was I stopped dwelling on the past, stopped getting anxious about the future. Instead, I planned for the future and I learned from the past.
I think that's a great and realistic sum up to live by because you're literally defining the moments as you presently live. And I think a lot of people, to your point of being like a motivational speaker and how they look to you, that could be a prevalent topic point for you. So my next follow-up question is, what's it like to have people look to you for advice?
Yeah, for my whole childhood, I always felt like maybe it's because of school. I always felt like I tried to fit into other groups. I would do as hard as I could to fit into other groups. And now that I've surrounded myself with people, because I'm telling you right now, you want to get to any destination in your life, you need to be around the right people who are going to uplift you and get you to that destination. And I'm telling you, I unfortunately lost a couple of friends not during cancer. During cancer, this sounds terrible. It's easy to support somebody when they're going through cancer and just saying, like, as a friend, at least. Lauren, I can understand the burden and stuff like that. But like as a friend, you're going to support them. Like it's your friend. Like they're going through a tough time. You want to help them. But when I said, hey guys, I'm done with cancer, and they expected me to be Matt from 2014 instead of now.
No.
Yep, I'm a different person. I don't go out and drink as much. I don't, go and do the things they always thought I wanted to do. I don't, talk about my high school glory days anymore. I'm planning for the future. And I said, I want to do something bigger with my life. And I had to surround it wasn't like I cut people out of my life, but they resented me for some reason. Some of them, trust me, 90% of my friends, still amazing friends, but that 10% hurts. And it really does. And you're going to lose that. If you're trying to do something great with your life, you're going to lose that 10%. And it's going to hurt for a little bit, but you're going to realize that you gain so many more new friends. I started getting in front of other entrepreneurs, other, young adults that have a similar vision as me. And that's where I built the confidence within myself of saying, hey, listen, like I can be like an influencer or a leader for this cancer space. I didn't have any confidence in myself because I was always like that person in the background of a group that you had these kids who their way of being, for some of the groups I was in, their way of being like the top guy was making fun of other people. And I just went with it because that's what I was in high school. But now I'm in front of kids who are like going to uplift me no matter what I do. And they're going to support me and not knock me down when I have something big with my life. So it allowed me to have the confidence in myself to say, hey, listen, I am worthy of sharing something that can really help these, people who, especially survivors, now I created a Facebook group in October. We have 2,600 survivors and patients in this Facebook group in just a matter of 5 to 6 months. And I'm telling you, man, it was only because I surrounded myself with right people that allowed me to have the confidence to say, I am worthy enough to help these survivors and patients through the mental and emotional struggles. I don't give medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but I can give them the advice that doctors can't, because most of them haven't gone through cancer. So I can help them through the survivorship part of saying, hey, listen, I understand you're lost. I understand you have a bigger path in your life. I understand that you get anxious when scans are coming up. I can help you with these because I've gone through it. I had to do it for 2 years where I wasn't helping people for 2 straight years here, Jared. I had to help myself first. And that's another big thing I would tell people. You have to take care of yourself before you can make an impact in somebody else's life. If you're an overweight personal trainer and you don't take care of your body, who's going to listen to you when you try to give them advice? You can have the best advice in the world, but no one's going to listen to you because they see that you're out of shape. That's the exact same thing that I had to do with myself. I had to figure myself out first, and then I could help those people. So that's what I would say. Get in front of the right people and take care of yourself and do the things you need to do first. And it'll build so much more confidence in you to be able to go help those people.
Kind of to relate a little bit, not so much in the cancer route, but also in finding those hobbies and making new friends for myself. So until about the pandemic, I had the same circle of about 30 friends cumulatively. All great friends of mine, don't get me wrong, but then at the same time, my routine was very subdued. It was kind of the same thing every week. I wasn't really building more of my network than I was. I was in a different career. So, like the fundraising world, I kind of felt like entitled to a certain extent, as far as like, oh, I have all these connections, so I just have my friends here. So then when I lost my fundraising job during the pandemic and became a teacher, this podcast and other things like along the lines, I've come to realize that when I'm doing things on the will of my own, there's more of an influence as far as meeting more of the right people.
Mhm. So true. It's so true. And I want to say to my 90% of the friends that I still love, like, no, you know who it is. You know that I still love you guys. It's just that little percentage, man, and it kills you sometimes. But you know what I've learned to do is I've learned to forgive. And it's not necessarily for their sake. I learned to forgive for myself.
Of
I
course.
learned to forgive because me constantly letting somebody else's opinion drag me down or saying that I shouldn't go do X, Y, and Z because they didn't see me like that for the past 25 years of my life, but maybe I've changed, because you can change your life. You just learn to forgive them and say, hey, listen, usually you realize that the people who criticize you or don't believe you the most, 5-10 years from now, when you do finally get that success in your life, guess who's going to be the number one supporter and coming right back to you? That same exact person. So yeah, that's what I would just say on building friendships and you losing a couple of people in your life. And I still have a ton of amazing friends from the past. So yeah, man, just wanted to touch that subject because I think it's a very difficult one for a lot of people. And this doesn't just have to be cancer. This is people going through challenging moments in their life and figuring that they want something bigger. And I feel like that's a big thing about this podcast, is doing something bigger with your life, having a great vision, having something powerful that you want to overcome and do something with your life. So I just wanted to really emphasize that topic.
Yes. And also, with my next follow-up question for you doing inspirational speaking now, for you sharing your story, do you feel like it's easier for you to do so, or do you think you channel it in different ways by your experience?
I do think it's easier. I think the more I share it, you want to know what's helped me? For a lot of people, it's really
Mm.
tough to share a story like, going through near-death experiences, because it can bring a lot of PTSD and a lot of emotions. And I think what's helped me is I totally, not for like, I'm not subduing it or I haven't like undermined it, but I've taken all of the stress and trauma off myself and I put it towards helping other people. And how I
Got
look
it.
at it is when you're giving back to somebody else, it's really hard to be anxious and being able to help somebody at the exact same time. So when I'm fully immersing and giving back to others, I don't have time to constantly focus on, myself. And I trust me, for 2 years, man, I had to focus on myself. But now I'm at that point where I can fully immerse and give back to others. And when you can do that, it helps with the anxiety, it helps with the PTSD, because you feel like you have a purpose, you feel like you have a meaning. And I think for a lot of people, where anxiety comes from is you don't feel like have a direction or you don't know where to go with your life. And that's okay. I'm not saying you have to go share your story to the world, but just help others in general with something really gives meaning to your life. And that's what's helped me be able to share my story is a lot more without having an emotional, I still have somewhat of an emotional connection, but not the emotional connection I did 2 years ago when I just started speaking, So, um, that's kind of how I feel, the relationship aspect, with me and Lauren, who are, in the process, we're probably going to be getting engaged here soon. And, things
Nice.
like that, like really, yeah, like it's incredible. Like, a cancer actually made us stronger. We were actually the tough part of our relationship before that. Now we're at the strongest point of our lives, and we feel like we can conquer anything together. And, so, that's what I would tell a lot of people is if you're having a tough time sharing your story, um, don't necessarily focus on yourself. Focus on how can you impact other people, and the emotional part of it, the stressful part at least, won't be as difficult for you. I'm not saying there won't be. There always is. There's still stress for me sometimes when I talk about being in a coma for 2 weeks. I had cardiac arrest a week after my coma, and like all of these things. It's still a little bit emotional, but um, I'm allowed to say, hey, listen, who's that next person that might have just needed to hear that message today? And that allows me to focus on what I need to do.
Yeah, and the simplest like tricks to your mind that way, or asking those simple questions to yourself as far as the selflessness of you towards other people can make the biggest difference in how you can interpret things as you evolve your mindset as well. So my final question for you is, what is the biggest change you want to see for yourself?
Hmm. Biggest change. I would say the biggest change for myself is two things. Number one is I'll be totally vulnerable. I still do worry what other people think of me when I'm constantly posting. Right here, I don't like. I'll be honest, totally transparent. I don't really like. I love talking. Like when we're in a conversation like this, I love it. But when it comes to posting on social media, going into lives and doing things like that, I get this sense of like, I still get this sense of insecurity, and something I need to work on. And the best way for me to work on it is to dive right into it and just say, hey, listen, I'm going to take what's called imperfect action. And what imperfect action is you take action and you fail along the way. Failure, guys, I want to tell you real quick, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is the best thing. That is another thing with, go back to school, I guess, is everything's A, B, or C, or you're a failure kind of. And I'm not trying to diminish school. There's a lot of great things about the school system, but for me, like there really is. I think there's incredible things about the school system. And I think that, for me, it's taught me so much. But when it comes to some type of other things, I learned that failing, like when you get to the actual world, failing is something that you have to learn. And I think it's something we should teach more is failure is feedback. Every no gets you closer to a yes. And that's what allows you to truly grow. If you are only succeeding in life, it's hard to learn. Like it's way easier to learn from your
Yes.
mistakes than to just constantly be given things or just, but when people work really hard at school, they're also working really hard. And when they get A's, that's awesome. So good, because guess what? They work their ass off to get that. But what I would try to tell people is that, I have to just learn to take more imperfect action. And that's an insecurity in me. So I'd like to see myself put myself out there more without worrying what the consequences are. And then number two is when I am, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, when I feel stuck, when I don't know where I want to go, when I feel like I have a vision, but I have no idea what the path is, I can procrastinate very easily. And when I say procrastinate, I can just hop onto TikTok, or I could just, do X, Y, and Z, like an easier task for the day that isn't going to get me to where I need to be. But remember, what I told you guys is the way to build confidence and the way to succeed in life is keeping the promises you make to yourself. So all you have to do is write 3 things you want to get done throughout the day. And if you can get all 3 of those done every single day, then you are on the road to success. And for me, some days I procrastinate, totally honest. So that's one thing I need to work on as well. So that's what I'd like to see change in my life.
Well, I have to say this. Good things in life come to those that wait. And then when you take action, they become better things along the way. So, with that being said, that concludes episode 37 for the Change Within podcast. And for those who haven't checked us out yet, for Change Within podcast, please do so on Anchor, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Matt, thank you very much for joining me today and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Gerard. Appreciate it, brother.
You got it. Bye bye.